Power distribution, ransomware, vendor outage. What's your plan for the first hour? Today, we're making disaster recovery practical so you can stay calm, retain customers, and keep cash flowing. Welcome to another episode of Unscripted with SST, the LinkedIn live show where we deep dive into the real, unfiltered world of IT and cybersecurity. Brought to you by Secure Strategic Technology, we're here to cut through the noise, share expert insights, and tackle the challenges shaping the future of managed IT services, live, raw, and unscripted. Joining me today to talk about business continuity and disaster recovery is my teammate at SST, Bo Elson, our COO. Together, we help organizations recognize the importance of continuity through disciplined process, proactive tooling, and tested runbooks. Bo, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
So before we kind of get into conversation here, Bo, and again, we apologize for being a little late to the start there. We had some technical difficulties, but no problem there. We worked right through it. I'm going to just do a level set for those listening today, and then we kind of jump into it. Does that sound good to you?
Yep, let's do it.
All right. So what we're going to cover, what is BCDR really and what it isn't. RTO and RPO in plain English, the rule of fives from a backup strategy perspective, and then we'll touch on the testing of your backups and recovery efforts, and then we'll talk a little bit around cloud and SaaS and what you need to do to make sure that you're protected there, and then we'll do a lightning round and then to wrap up the discussion today. Sound good?
Yep, sounds good.
Awesome. Well, let's roll into it right away here. So I guess the most appropriate first question that I would have for you is, what is business continuity and disaster recovery really? I think the misconception a lot of people have is, I got backups. What else am I missing? Like, I'm good, right? I don't need anything else. I'm doing my backups. Can you talk about like how ridiculous that statement is?
Well, yeah, it is. I mean, it's people don't necessarily plan any further than that. And so really when we look at BCDR, the business continuity part of it is really, the operations and how do you keep the business going during that time of disruption. And then when you look at the disaster recovery part, it's, what do you do to fully restore those systems to where they need to be? So as far as like the continuity part, there's so much where people don't take the time to actually plan for those disruptions, like, downtime procedures. Hey, this is unavailable. How do we keep the business going? And how long can we run the business in this time? Right. So those are things that just help inform as well, like some of the technology strategy that you may have to have in place. Do you have things even architected right? And then when you look at the disaster recovery part of it is, yeah, we have backups, but how long do they take to restore? Like what do you have to do after you have them restored? And so that whole part of like, how does that all fit together and support the needs of the business to keep it going? Because, those type of disruptions do happen, and having a plan and having processes in place is going to help, mitigate the impact of those issues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So now we kind of know, what BCDR is and why just having backups isn't the goal here. Who's responsible for business continuity and disaster recovery planning? Who owns it within the organization?
Yeah, generally I would say it's got to have leadership participation, across all the different areas of the business. It's not just like IT can't be the ones like, hey, here's what this looks like. Certainly they're going to have some stake in, the restoration part of how long, based on the technologies in place, how long it's going to take to restore from a backup, right? That's kind of where that lies. But as far as like the continuity and what needs to happen and that kind of stuff, if you don't have input from all of leadership, like you're just not going to have a comprehensive plan that you need.
Yeah. Yeah. So can we talk a little bit about, I think we've done this in previous conversations, but you can't kind of talk through these terms enough, right? Can you talk about recovery time objective and recovery point objective and what these acronyms represent and what they mean?
Yeah. So really the recovery time is how long you can tolerate that system to be down. Whatever that impact this system, you need to have a goal in place for how long it is before that system needs to be back up and running. And then the recovery point, that's really around the data within that system. So these are more like technical type of things. So the recovery point saying, 1 hour means we can lose 1 hour's worth of data. That's what we can recreate within the system. So if we restore, we can go back an hour and the business can safely handle the cost or downtime associated with recreating that data up to an hour. So those are really important parts. And the other thing, when as a business leader talking about, and we just had some conversations, a couple different conversations with customers recently where we were talking about, these type of terms and trying to explain it. And really the big thing is really understanding, that maximum time of disruption that the business can tolerate. Certainly when you're putting together, that RTO, we have to recover within this point in time. You need to know, can the business really survive without this process? And really looking at these, they're both around systems, but also around those critical business processes like payroll or it's inventory, it's production. Like how long could those processes, be not run within the business? So like the systems then that depend on them, how long do they take to recover? And then, we could be down a day, right? We could safely handle a day of disruption and, we would have to do something else. But it's understanding that. And that really has to come from the leadership and have some buy-in and understanding. Yes, we all agree this is the maximum time. Well, then you can reverse engineer and make sure you have those RPO and RTOs because, the technology, there's so many different choices these days. So the technology can support it. But first, you need to know what those business goals are.
I mean, don't you think when we have these conversations all the time, there's major disconnect from leadership? And so beneficial when we start talking about the things we were just discussing, right?
Yeah.
It's now they're starting to connect the dots. They're starting to understand, I can't just willy-nilly say, we can't afford it or we can't be down for any longer than an hour. Well, then we start mapping this out and designing and architecting solutions to deliver that. And then they might see the costs associated with that. So now they're like, well, actually, in reality, we can probably afford to be down for 5 hours. Right. Okay, that's great. But that was a successful conversation there, don't you think? I mean, we see that a lot, don't we?
For sure. And I think even, a lot of times when we come in and start having these conversations, the discussion when people are talking about how do we do this process, it's all centered around a single system. Like, oh, we use the application A for that. And it's like, this is how we do all the like X, Y, and Z. And that's that process. And then when you like, well, okay, let's take a step back and talk about like how that really works. And what you find out is those critical processes, they're going to involve many different applications and whole workflow processes. And so like, yeah, we can't be down for more than a day doing this. Well, turns out you got 5 systems you need to recover because none of those are going to work. And that whole workflow doesn't work because these systems all need to be available. And so like when you have those discussions and take a step back and understand really what needs to happen to do that process, now you can understand the systems that are in place. You can understand the underlying technologies that support those systems and really then make sure, yes, we are going to be able to meet these business objectives. But you got to step back and understand those processes and what it takes to do those processes before you can have that comprehensive plan.
Yeah, I mean, and that also flushes out dependencies across systems. In order, if this system needs to have, a pretty aggressive RPO, RTO, but in order for it to be running, this other system's required. Well, now we know that we need to have both of these things up and running within the same time frames, right? And then maybe there's another system that isn't as important, nor is it, integrated, right? So we don't necessarily need to spend a lot of money on architecting a solution to get this thing up and running. All that is good stuff to really have those deep conversations that again, we need direction from leadership on.
Yeah, you got to understand the business.
Yeah, and it's really about architecting the right solution beforehand so that we know exactly what the behavior is going to be, and we can have the opportunity to be a little cost prudent at that time. Whereas if we don't spend time architecting a solution beforehand, then whatever we have after we like whatever whenever this event happens and we need to go leverage, backups, and we really didn't have a plan or we didn't architect an appropriate solution, usually the outcome is not very good, and can be quite costly in many different ways to the business.
Yep, absolutely.
So let's talk backup strategy. I guess what separates we think we have backups from we know we can recover?
Yeah. So really, I would say this is kind of where you get the rule of fives or good. So we'll talk a little bit of numbers here. So really it's your backup strategy, like how you're backing that up, making sure you have like your tiered recovery options available. And then also like having the established processes, knowing like the run books, making sure you've thought through like how this should work in times of disaster, what you're going to recover. So first, like, just making sure your backups are architected correctly. You should have, it's the 3, 2, 1, 0, right? So you have 3 different copies. You have 2 different types of media that you're writing it to. And then you got to make sure it's offsite. And then when it's offsite to nowadays and kind of the thing you hear all the time, immutability, right? You can't touch the stuff. You got a copy of that's protected from the bad guys. And then also kind of the last one is testing. You got to test those backups periodically, and you shouldn't have any errors as part of that test. I mean, it's such a huge thing. And then when you're looking at actually recovering from those backups, it's understanding your tiered recovery strategy. So that you think of it of like how long is it going to take to restore? And you have your different tiers of performance, right? So, how quickly can I restore from this copy, right? It's like, hey, this is local. It's on flash drives. I got 10 gig connectivity. I can quickly restore that, or potentially even snapshots or something on there, right? So I have like a really quick recovery point. And then you have other recovery points that are going to take longer. You can't just depend on one, right? That's kind of when we look at that 3, 2, 1 process from before, right? You got to have some different copies, and those need to be tiered appropriately. But understand when you're doing so, performance can be impacted, and also cost is impacted too. Generally, the slower restore points are going to be a little bit cheaper, but it's also better protection. So, make sure you have that in place. And then the last thing is knowing before you have to recover how you are going to recover. That's those run books. So knowing, I've had a scenario where it's like, oh yeah, we're going to restore this application, have an issue. And it's like, yep, restore the application database. We know we can restore that in 20 minutes. And they, we go through to test it, and yeah, you restore that. Well, they find out database is on a different server, clustered with something else. So like, oh, well, that doesn't work if the database isn't restored. And, oh, well, you know what, you can't authenticate anything until the domain controller is up, or you have an authentication source. And so you figure out all these dependencies. Well, if you have a disaster and everything's down, you need to be efficient with this. Like, so what is the sequence to restore these services so you're not having to go do rework when these come up? We test and we know, system A is available and system B, and also, the dependencies within those systems. So when those come online, now we have access to do like application C and D, right? You've thought of that stuff. We just had that many times where it's like, we just start restoring back from backups, and, the non-critical things are the first things that come up. And it's like, why did you spend time and effort to bring those up? Those could have been offline for a week and the business isn't impacted. But now this critical system is still waiting because you restored the wrong thing. So having those plans and having that process in place is critical as well. You got to think about the recovery process, not just the backup process.
Right. So immutable. When we say that term, we're talking about offsite, tamper-proof, encrypted backups. So really, they're another level of protection, right, to keep attackers out of those backups. Correct.
Yep. Have something that the bad guys can't destroy, because that's what they're going to go for, right? They go for the data. They go for that's the high value target. So that it's more valuable if there's no backups, right? So you got to make sure those are protected too, and have something where nobody can do anything with it.
Yeah, I mean, so that's awesome. A detailed backup strategy in your run book, so you know exactly how it's being executed, including the recovery efforts, testing these recovery efforts. All that's really good, right? And the lion's share that's falling on the responsibility of IT. But now to take it another level, because when we have scenarios like this, communication from multiple people within the organization needs to go out as well, right? When we're employing business continuity and disaster recovery plans, like what are your thoughts on further testing all of the processes in place around BCDR? Like, do you believe in tabletop exercises? Because I mean, what we have on paper, really, how well can we execute it? Not just the recovery of the actual backup, but the comms and all that. Like, can you talk a little bit about like bringing
I like the tabletops are great to go through this, and really kind of from an operational perspective is where you find a lot of the gaps. And really, I think a lot of times when we're doing tabletops, the easiest thing these days is talk like cyber incident and the disruption as a result of those, and kind of think of, the impact in creating those scenarios. And that's an easy way to understand, like operationally, how you build those, the continuity plan. What can you do in the time these systems are disrupted? That's when you kind of get the juices flowing and find the gaps. From a testing perspective, just strictly from an IT recovery process, you still need to go through and test just the fidelity of those backups. Can you restore to those in the time that was promised, and do they work? Now, a lot of backup products these days are going to have some automated testing tools as part of them, right? That they're going through, powered up the backups, ran some cursory tests, and yep, these services are running, everything is good. So like those are good, and to have part of those tools. But nowadays too, with a lot of the technology and cloud configurations and stuff, like you can do more than that. You could actually simulate a full recovery and the usability of those applications. It's not necessarily an easy thing to do, but like it used to be cost wise, you would have to duplicate your environment or have a redundant data center, and it was a whole ordeal in itself and quite costly. So how frequently would you do that? And now, like, you can, at least from an IT perspective, probably do that stuff on a quarterly basis, semi-annual basis, or something where you could spin it up. Usually, a lot of backup solutions these days are connected to some cloud, and people have some cloud presence. So, figure out how you can isolate that and start it up, and maybe even get an end user. Like, here's what this is going to look like. Is this usable in time of a scenario? And then the other part with that too is when you're thinking through those recovery times, like I think of this around like a lot of the cloud recovery is everybody's like, oh, we can always recover to the cloud. You got to factor in the usability too. Like, so if you're going to recover to the cloud, make sure those applications work. Client server apps, we've seen some legacy apps and their plan was, oh, we just spin up in the cloud, we got a copy there, and they're just completely unusable. So when you're going through those recovery tests, and usually like you really got to go through it in depth when you're first creating those recovery plans. How is this going to work? And here's our options to test and make sure those systems actually work the way that you want to.
Yeah, that's great. So it's a little, so what we're basically talking about is you can take production backups of your environment and actually rehydrate them in non-production isolated settings to validate that things are running.
Yep.
And you're saying we want to be doing this a minimum twice a year, but more than likely quarterly, and maybe even more frequently if you have even more critical workloads.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the criticality and the cost to do so, but at a minimum, just like if you're doing nothing, just play back the backup sometimes. Start them up, make sure they can power. You get to a login screen, the essential services or databases on them, like that stuff quite easily you can do in a lot of cloud platforms with their like integrated backup solutions, or even if you write something to the cloud, just you can automate a lot of that stuff too. Just power it on and check these things and get a little report. It's more peace of mind. If it passes that, your chances are you're good, right? But you still need to do more just every once in a while just to make sure, right?
Yeah, that's great. So moving on to our next discussion point here. I want to talk a little bit about third party or, cloud platforms and the backups associated with that, and maybe some misconceptions there, some hidden gaps. I mean, a lot of folks are using SaaS-based, cloud-based platforms, and they feel like, hey, it's in the cloud, I'm good. Like, can you expand upon why that is a major I mean, that's not true, right? Like, that is not the position we should be taking. We are definitely not covered. Can you expand upon that a little bit?
Yeah. So really, a lot of times everybody's like, oh, we just move to the cloud and we don't worry about any of the data protection associated with those. One, like the most popular one that we deal with is really around Microsoft 365 platform. It's a great example of it. Most companies have a significant amount of data, both like, emails where it started, right? But all kinds of data is residing up there, and Microsoft doesn't protect it. They give you some availability and you can run the workload. And yeah, if you delete stuff, it kind of keeps in a bucket. But you got to do more than that, right? Like with these cloud apps, generally, like how do you protect your own data? They're not worried about protecting your data. They're creating highly available systems that you can use, but still make sure you know how bad your data is being protected up there, and you have the full fidelity that you require for your business. Like, yes, you got kind of your rolling backups. We always use this as we start to move more like documents and that type of data up into the cloud, because it's easy to consume up there in collaboration. The usability part is fantastic. But if somebody goes in there and accidentally deletes a file just through normal workflow, what do you do, right? Or a bad guy gets in there and they can delete all that data. What do you do? Like, Microsoft's not backing that up. Like, they have no responsibility. If you look at their agreements, they're not taking care of that. So making sure you have those protections on the cloud tools that you depend on is a really important part of your business too. Sometimes, hey, maybe you got something with the cloud system that you have and they're doing something and you have a little bit more, but you need to make sure. A lot of the easy, simple cloud platforms are really the ones around collaboration, aren't doing much. Make sure you got something there. And if you're depending on other cloud hosted apps, really, to run your business, I would make sure your backups and your recovery is part of it. Certainly, you're going to have a higher availability with cloud solutions, but you still can't just ignore the data protection and the data security part of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a set and forget it. Like you mentioned it already, Microsoft 365. We go into, talking with prospects all the time. Hey, what are you doing for your Microsoft 365 backups? And they're like, what? Like that is a pretty common thing. So, and like you said, there's a lot of cloud-based, SaaS-based platforms have built-in backups, actually a backup, element to it. You just got to know what it is. Yep, for sure. So are you ready for this? We're going to try something new here. We're going to call it the lightning round. Obviously it's kind of self-explanatory. I'm going to just rip you a question or a scenario and you give me a 60-second response. Does that sound fun to you? You excited about this?
Very.
Okay. Sounds like I can tell in your voice. I can see it in your face. So Microsoft 365 outage, emails down hard. Go.
Yeah. So that, and again, having a preparation for this, what I would say is making sure you have alternate communication plan as part of it. Like if you're if you're in that platform, you're probably using it for collaboration, which could be chat, it could be phone, all that kind of stuff. Do you have another system that you can fail over to? Do you have like a temporary calling tree? What does that look like? From that perspective, how do you communicate with clients if you're depending on, email, or that collaboration is working with your clients? Like, how are you going to notify them? Make sure you have something in place for that. Email, I would say backups, like we just talked about those, making sure you have your backups ready or know what you have for backups in case there's some data loss as part of that disruption, just so kind of that peace of mind, and ready to, I guess, if you have to restore it, knowing like what you're going to do when that system comes up, and like really a lot of it is just going to be around the communication. You're going to depend on that for communication. Make sure you have some other way.
Yeah, because if you're using Microsoft 365 for actually, as a phone system for telephony services,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not available, you got to be communicating to your client so
Mm-hmm.
they know you're working through something. And so next one here for you, ISP outage at HQ. Go.
Well, hopefully, this one I would say is probably like having a different redundant connection. Does your firewall support and having a backup connection? Like there's some cheap options these days. A lot of times, like I've seen people use Starlink. I've seen cellular devices. Just having like a separate lower throughput broadband connection, like as an emergency connectivity, just having something like that that you can fail over to is where I would start. The other part would be, if people are depending on like remoting in or using cloud, like how does that stuff work? If they fail over to this secondary connection or use that, like how are they going to be able to communicate in? Because obviously some of that stuff, a different internet connection, somebody coming in, it's not going to work the same way. So making sure those processes in place and people know how to use those or what happens during those time of disruptions, probably the biggest thing that come to mind.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. So last one here for you. I'm going to go. Key vendor is down for 24 hours. Go.
Hopefully you have a process, that business continuity process,
Yeah.
that you figured out. This is unavailable. This is how we keep the business running. Probably have a communication plan, both with staff and if other vendors that you're working with and what they depend on. Like you have some sort of form of communication so you know what's happening during that time.
Yeah.
Maybe is there another system that you could use in the meantime? Do you have a fallback plan at a different system that maybe you could use temporarily that's not too impact causing? I mean, I've seen people have a backup solution for some critical processes. That's probably the biggest thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's good. Well, thanks for your efforts there. That was really good under pressure.
Yep.
So I guess to kind of get to the end here on this discussion today, you want to talk a little bit about maybe our process on how we approach the business continuity disaster recovery discussions in how we start from zero and get to a finished product?
Yeah, I mean, ours really, it starts with when we're onboarding customers, we do a business impact analysis. And that's really where we try to step back and it's not just like looking at the IT systems and this is what's going on, but starting with the business and talking through impact in those critical processes. Like, it's what you do, who does what, what the impact of that business is, and then going into like those key functions, critical processes. And then you drill down into, what are the systems that support those key critical processes. So we kind of go through it in a whole meeting, take an hour or two and really try to dive in and learn more about that. But it's not something that you just learn. Hey, I asked you everything and understand, right? It takes time to understand the business, and somebody sitting there too, sitting on the other side, that they're not just off the top of my head, here's the whole business and going to paint that clear picture either. So it starts with that initial discussion and that impact analysis and those questionnaires and where you get that data. And then it's more discussions and more learning and engagement with the customer, we do it a lot with our technical alignment engineer, where they're sitting down and talking and meeting with the people in the business and the frontline work, like how you're doing, what those challenges are. We do it in our strategic meetings that we do generally quarterly at a minimum with customers, where we're talking through like business challenges and systems that they're changing and the architecture, and where we're trying to educate them with what's going on and learn about the business and what their needs are, and making sure we have that comprehensive plan. So when pen comes to paper, we don't sit down and build a DR plan and BC plan with any of our customers like on our roadmap. That's later. If they don't have anything, we're not capable of day one just saying, okay, this is how it's going to work. Certainly, We're going to put some technologies in place,
Yeah.
but it takes a little while to learn, that business and what's going on. But eventually, after some time, we have a comprehensive plan with the customer where we're helping them go through because of what we've learned and what we understand of like this is how this stuff is going to work and kind of build that plan collectively.
Yeah. So our technical alignment engineers going on site with some frequency, collecting data about the
Mm-hmm.
applications and how, the current processes they have.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually there'll be enough data so we can architect and design a backup and recovery platform, including a business continuity and disaster recovery plan that gets implemented into run books. And then when we get to the quarterly meetings, we're reviewing these run books, getting sign off. And then further quarterly meetings, we're executing tabletop exercises, recovery efforts, so on and so forth. Yeah, like very, very cool. Well, thanks for that. And then I guess if we just had to end on some takeaways or just like just some nuggets that people can leave with, that they should maybe go back to their enterprise or their organization and really say, hey, we need to focus on this part, or we need to put some energies into here. Can you leave our guests with some of that? Just a couple of goals.
Yeah, I would say like get leadership involvement. Like this stuff isn't just an IT process. Business continuity, disaster recovery involves the entire business. So make sure you got buy-in. Make sure you have your RTO, your RPO, your mean time to tolerable downtime or time to disruption. You have that defined with leadership buy-in, so you know what to expect. And then also like kind of a simple one, just make sure those backups are architected the right way, that you have the copies and you're archiving and you know those recovery times, getting things off of like on premises to the cloud and making sure it's immutable. Simple things with technology these days, just make sure it's in place.
Yeah. Anything else?
No, I think that's probably it. You got anything?
I would think if anybody out there's like doesn't know where to start, definitely reach out to us. You can hit us up on our website. You can hit us up on our LinkedIn page, and we'd be happy to talk BCDR and establish a readiness plan for you. We can rip through your top 5 processes, set targets, and work towards that first recovery drill if you have never done something like that before. Bo and the team would be happy to help you out. I guess with that, let's wrap it up here. Disasters don't keep calendars, prepared companies do. Bo, thanks for your wisdom. And to everyone watching, stay secure, stay strategic, and stay resilient. We'll see you next time on Unscripted with SST.